Hi and welcome. My name is Amy Bryant of Wild Child Counseling here in Atlanta, Georgia, and Parenting Beyond Punishment, which is an online support and teaching community. And I am here today with Rachel Bailey of rachel-bailey.com. She's a mom and a parent educator, and she has worked with me on the No Spank Challenge for several years. And has helped me when I've been in a tight spot. I had the flu one year and she just fills in for me. She's amazing. She's flexible and intuitive and warm and knowledgeable. And Rachel, I am just really happy to be with you here today. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I could say all the same about you, and I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about what are emotionally intelligent boundaries? We're going to talk about a couple of examples. We also will use some examples from the people who are here watching right now. Then we're going to talk about tools to help us create and enforce emotionally intelligent boundaries, and then some potential obstacles that might come up, and then how we can sort of overcome those obstacles or work with those obstacles, as the case may be. So as we start, I just really want to talk about what it means to set emotionally intelligent boundaries and really to kind of define it. So setting setting emotional intelligent boundaries means that we're setting neurodevelopmentally informed limits with kindness and respect. So we use kindness and respect because those are things we want to model for our children, because that's how our children then learn to be kind and respectful, while also speaking their truth. And then neurodevelopmentally informed means that we're considering the child's overall development, their brain development, their body development, their sensory development, and really considering all of those things together. So that's where we're starting. And as we talk about examples and tools, we'll really expand on kind of these basic premises. So we wanted to start talking about some examples of emotionally intelligent boundaries. And Rachel, where would you like to start?
So, when I'm describing emotionally intelligent boundaries, I like to start with an example of one child doing something aggressive, because we all know that aggression is absolutely not acceptable. And I also think those are the boundaries where we really struggle to stay calm because, we get triggered.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give an example of what an emotionally intelligent boundary could be when, maybe a child hits another child. So what an emotionally intelligent boundary would be is basically we're focusing on a respect-based limit. We're still setting a limit, but we're enforcing it with respect. And one of the things I really focus on is we respect kids by recognizing they have a perspective as well. Even though their behavior is something that might need to be modified, they still have a perspective. And often they're missing tools to be able to reach the limit or boundary that we've set. So we're respectful in recognizing their perspective and recognizing that instead of punishing them or making them pay for what they've done, we can actually teach them the tools to be successful. So if a child were to hit another child, an emotionally intelligent boundary would start with us regulating ourselves so that we're not, reacting in a way that demonstrates that we can't handle the situation. We're asking our kids to be able to respond maturely and responsibly when something doesn't go their way. We need to start by showing what that looks like. So we start by staying calm, and then we do certainly set a limit and say, we don't hit other children. But then we also respect that that child has a perspective, and we say, you hit someone because maybe they were getting really close to your toys and you didn't know how to handle it. So next time that happens, and we give them a tool for what they can do next time, which may be something like come tell an adult, or it may even be something like take a few deep breaths before you respond. So we're basically modeling emotional regulation. We're respecting their perspective and giving them tools to be successful instead of immediately going into punishment.
Right.
That's one example.
Yes, I love that example because we are so easily triggered by aggression, either from our own experiences or just because, of course, we want to protect our children. Sometimes it's that fear that our child, oh my gosh, our kid's aggressive. They're going to grow up to be aggressive and they're going to end up in jail. We can easily go there. I can easily go there. And I know a lot of parents can too. Um, so I love that. And I think a lot of what I say reiterates what you've said. The very first thing we have to do is to get calm. Because if we're not calm, there's just no way that our children can be calm. Their brains are so attuned to our brains that if we are flipping out, they're going to flip out too. And they're already upset, right? That's why they've hit. Um, Behavior is always communication. And so it might be communication that's not very skillful. And that's why we want to take the time to get calm. So from a neurodevelopmental perspective, in order for them to learn, we have to know their brain is dysregulated. So we get calm, we help them get calm, because unless they're calm, they can't learn. And then we have to connect with them. If they don't feel heard and listened to, if we just go in and say, you can't hit, that's not right, they're like, dude, you don't even know what's going on, mom, right?
Exactly.
So we have to like get curious. We have to say like, you know, sometimes we might know, we might see for a very young child, they might be hitting because someone just took their toy, like, give me that back, right? Or they want to turn, but they don't have the words to use to ask for that. So we might go in and say something like, I see that Sue took your toy. We can ask for it, you know, we can say that's mine, or you can point and point back to yourself. You know, and so you're calm, you connect, you see like this is what's going on. You give them the tools. What I really like for really young children is to play around it. And so if you know your child has a hard time with it, you get it out and you guys pretend that you're taking it from each other and giving it back to each other, and you do the role play and you're laughing, because that laughing releases tension for ourselves. It releases tension in them. It helps create an emotional connection so that the next time, instead of going to hit to get that toy back, they go, oh yeah, you know, that's me, you know, my turn. And they're able then to make those connections. So those are kind of the things I do, but it's always going in, stopping the behavior, keeping them safe. And exactly what you said, we have to get calm. We have to teach skills.
Yeah. And I love what you said about children will think, you know, if we don't connect with them and if we're only seeing it from our perspective and they're thinking, hey, you don't know what's going on here, all of a sudden that shuts them down.
Yes.
And so, like you said, they can't learn in those moments. And I think it's really hard for us to recognize that children have a perspective and that we have to connect with it, because we're so busy thinking about hitting isn't okay.
Yeah.
But we have to recognize, like you said, that behavior is always communication. And many children already know that hitting is not okay, but in that moment, they can't access that.
Yes.
Remember that. So we need to, remind them of what to do in those situations.
Yeah. You know, kids don't want to hit. What they want is that toy or to get it back or whatever it is that they want. And it can be really upsetting to them to hit another child because they do know that that's not what they want to do. They just don't know what to do instead.
Exactly, which is why teaching is so much more effective, in my opinion, than punishment. You know, if we can focus on teaching tools in the long run, you know, it just is so much more effective. And parents will always say to me, well, you know, life is about consequences. And of course it is. And I always say, if you want to use a consequence, just consider teaching as well. You know, consider, because ultimately in the long run, it's the teaching that has more of an impact than any of the consequences.
Well, there always is a consequence, right? When a child hits another child, that other child is very upset.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really hard for lots of children to cope with. Now, the child might giggle and run away, but that giggling and running away is a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
That giggling is about tension. They're smiling, and you know, when you look at your kid and they smile and they look mischievous and they run away, that's not always about them being happy and mischievous. A lot of times it's really about them being upset. And that's how it bubbles out.
Absolutely.
And when we remember that, we go, oh, we have a hard time. I have clients, some young children clients, that their defense mechanism is laughing. They will giggle through the whole session, and that's how I know that they are dysregulated.
Absolutely. These big feelings are energy inside, and they need to be released somehow, and they're not always released aggressively. Absolutely. Right. Sometimes they're released as laughter or crying. But yeah, that laughter is one that we don't often associate with these big feelings or feeling bad, but it really is.
Yeah.
It certainly can be.
Yeah. If you're watching right now and you have a question or a specific scenario you'd like for us to use while we're talking about setting limits, please feel free to use the Q&A and tell us the age of your child, a recent thing that happened, sort of what your child did, what you did, how your child responded, and that'll be a great way we can begin to fold some of your own personal experiences in here today. So what about some tools, Rachel? What tools do you tend to go to when it comes to creating and enforcing emotionally intelligent boundaries?
I think probably the most important tool as a mom, I think the most important tool is tools for myself to calm
Yeah.
down, because that is always the first step. When we are not calm, we actually can't connect with other people. When we're in sort of our fight or flight response, our brain almost doesn't allow us to see a child's perspective because it's so focused on survival. So I know as a parent and as someone who works with parents for a living, I always start with how do we regulate ourselves? And, you know, for me personally, I know I need to start with recognizing that I'm actually about to lose it, that I'm not calm.
Yeah.
And I know when I first started this journey myself, I insisted that there were no signals in my body telling me that I was about to lose it. I said, it just happens like that.
Yeah.
But after a while, I realized our body actually sends us signals, just like, and I say this to parents, just like our bodies tell us when we're hungry or we're tired or we have to go to the bathroom. Our body will actually send us a signal when we're about to lose it. And I finally realized mine is my face gets hot. And that's when I know that I'm about to lose it. And then I actually started to associate that feeling with, okay, I need to learn how to handle this feeling. Instead of acting on that feeling, which is what I used to do, we need to learn how to do something different. And what I try to do is release that feeling. Instead of on my children, I do something. One of the things that I really do is, because I tend to be someone who's really in my head, I use strategies that are sort of in my head, and I'll do like a little mental exercise. Nothing too hard. I think that's going to frustrate me, but something like 18 plus 13, where I have to carry the one. Just something slightly difficult actually starts to bring me back online and get me out of that really big fight or flight response. And these are the strategies that I start to teach parents is how do we recognize we're about to lose it? And how do we do something different instead of turning those big feelings out on our children by yelling and threatening and punishing? How do we use that energy in a different way so that we can get out of our fight or flight response? So that's one of the tools.
I love that. And I use math whenever I am about to laugh and it's inappropriate. So yeah, I totally love that tool.
Yeah.
And it does. I love it. I've never thought about using it when I'm feeling really emotionally intense.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so going to try that.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Sure.
A lot of times what I do is the inhale with the really slow exhale. What we've learned is through neuroscience and through the works of people like Dr. Stephen Porges is that that sends a signal to our brain that we're safe. Because if we're running from a bear in the woods, we're going to be like shallow breathing, right, to get our muscles oxygenated. But if we're doing a really slow exhale, it sends a signal to our brain that we're safe because we're not breathing fast. But more than that, it actually calms our whole autonomic nervous system for reasons that I really can't explain. But if you can read the scientists work on it, and they can. So I do use that. And, you know, when you first start it, it might take you a few minutes for that to calm you down. But after a while, depending on your experience and time, it can really help, you know, maybe one breath or two breaths. I wonder what it'd be like to do that and try to do math at the same time.
I wonder. That could be
Right?
a really effective strategy.
Right? Whew, I feel hopeful. Okay. We all get dysregulated. So that is just a normal part of our emotional response system.
Yeah.
Um,
So I know we have a question.
we do.
So should we start to address that one?
Sure, let's do.
Okay, so the question is, my son is 7 years old. When we are joking, he will feel offended easily.
Okay.
So do you want to talk about that one a little bit?
Sure. So here's what comes up for me, Rachel, and
Mhm.
I'll be curious to hear what you say. I think that we have to know who our children are and what resonates with them. Um, some children are more easily offended than others. I know there are some neurological differences in children. Some children with ADHD in particular will become more offended around what we might contextualize as joking, but they take more seriously. Um, and so if your child feels offended, it's important to recognize that and to value it, that that is their feelings and that their feelings are valid. So you might move in and say, "Oh, buddy, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean that to hurt your feelings. That was not my intention. I wonder if there's some way we might find to laugh about this, or and it might be that we find ways to joke about ourselves, to laugh about things we do." Like Rachel and I earlier were talking about how sometimes we turn on our computer and we think, oh, please don't have an update, and we can laugh about those things in a way that isn't self-deprecating because that's not particularly genuine, but just real struggles. Can we laugh at things that we struggle with? And to bring that authenticity. I think that's what comes up for me when I read about this.
Absolutely. I agree. I think there are definitely temperament differences in children, and some children are more maybe sensitive is the word to use, where they feel things more strongly. And then I also think there's an environmental impact. I always talk about when, human beings, and it doesn't matter how old we are, when we're in a bad place, we are also more sensitive and we're less likely to be
Yes.
able to handle people joking about us, or will interpret things as criticism that aren't even necessarily meant to be critical just because we're in a bad place. So
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely, respecting a child's temperament, but also teaching children how to deal with, this is what I call yuck. Yuck is a blanket term I use to describe basically when we're in a bad place, whether we're hungry or tired or overwhelmed, but also teaching children, if it's just a temporary situation, how to handle their yuck. Because when they're in a bad place and they're really triggered by something we say or by someone joking about us, we can actually teach them ways to cope so that that doesn't really enter their bodies and offend them so much. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to consider the temperament, and also maybe something's going on for that child, and we can teach them to handle, the discomfort of life a little bit.
Yes.
So
Thank you. I
absolutely.
love your yuck factor.
Yeah.
There's a whole webinar on it, and it's just lovely and makes me smile and laugh and
Yeah, because
it
yuck
makes
plays such a huge role in behavior, and
yeah.
most people are so unaware of that basically when humans are in a bad place, we don't act positively, period.
Yeah.
I mean, even
Yes.
as adults. So if
Oh
we
no.
can actually learn to regulate our yuck
Yeah.
instead of, making life happy all the time, because it's not going to be, if we can learn how to cope with it, things are so much better. Our kids are better off, we're better off. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to mention we have people from Malaysia and West Virginia and Virginia, from Charleston and Oregon and Woodstock, Georgia, and I'm just so happy to see all you people here. Thank you. We have another question, Rachel. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
So Michelle says, what do we do about the big emotions that come with setting limits? I'm so happy to read this because this is something we wanted to talk about. For instance, when my 6-year-old son is in trouble for something, his response is always, you're rude or you're mean, right? I can hear that, right? You're so mean or you're so rude. I lost my pen. Um, and so she says, we often say in response, we're not being rude, buddy. You just don't like what we're trying to tell you right now. But this has been going on for a long time. I know he's a kid, but he doesn't seem currently able to accept responsibility for any of the situation. He will apologize for things after the fact, so I consider that a great sign. I'm going to grab a pen. Sorry.
Okay, so that's okay. Do you
This
want
is
to
a
jump in,
great
Amy, or do
question.
you want
Go
me
ahead. Go
to?
ahead.
Okay. So one of the things that I want to point out, since I already sort of introduced this topic of yuck, is actually the way yuck works. And I always describe it to parents as like big emotions almost follow like a rainbow shaped curve. And when we're in an emotion, it sort of gets bigger and bigger, it reaches a peak, and then it comes down. And what's really important to know is that if this is a curve of yuck, if we're in a bad place, that positive behavior and the ability to accept responsibility and the ability to have empathy and all those good things we want in our kids, they don't exist on the curve of yuck, because when we're in yuck, we're actually in our fight or flight response. So what happens is once a child has entered yuck and we want them to behave positively, they're actually unable to do that. But interestingly, just like you pointed out, once they've done something, I call this traveling the curve. Once they've actually gotten through this curve, that's when they're re-regulated and they can access that more mature, responsible part of the brain. And so one of the things we can do with the big emotions that happen when we set limits, because they're going to happen, one of the things we can do is teach kids actually how to handle their yuck when they're in it. But we also have to set our expectations that they're not going to behave positively until they've traveled that curve. But once the curve is over, that's when all this sort of responsible, positive behavior comes back.
Yeah.
So part of our job is to be patient and to teach children in that moment actually that they're safe, rather than that we're going to focus on their negative behavior. Because when they're in that bad place, it's interesting, their brains are actually scanning the environment to see, is it safe out there? And if we are criticizing their behavior and we're telling them that they're wrong, it actually teaches their brain that they're not safe. So if we can support them in their big feelings, they actually get through that curve much more quickly, and then they can re-regulate and get back to the behavior that we want to see. So those are a couple of my thoughts. Amy,
I love it. I love that the image for that just makes so much sense for me, because it's totally what it happens, right? The rainbow curve.
Yes.
I like the rainbow image too, because it's like there's light, there's something at the end, hang in there. I got you.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
So our kids, when we set a limit, they're not always going to like it, and it's okay for them not to like it. Because frankly, I don't always want to stop at a red light because I got places to go. But I'm 45, and so I stop. So what he's saying is, when he says you're rude or you're mean, or what my daughter says when she's upset, which is usually like you're mean, is like, I don't like it, and I wish you wouldn't set that limit. And so it's important to validate what they say, what they mean, right? Like, I know, I wish I could say, yes, you can have your 5th scoop of ice cream. But it's time to be done. And just to hold what I call holding that space. I probably heard that term from someone, but I use it. So when we set the limit and then we allow them to be upset, because it gives us that opportunity we talked about to model kindness and respect. You're upset and I'm here, and I can hear you until you feel better. I used this train analogy, excuse me, in a webinar recently, where we're like trains and emotions are like tunnels. And in order to get to the light at the end, we have to travel all the way through that emotional tunnel to get to the light and to feel better. Because if we cut it off, if we cut those emotions off, we're going to be stuck in what Rachel calls yuck, right? And we might be able to fake it and get through it, but those feelings are going to eke out throughout the day. And so what our children need is for us to hold the space for them to get all the way through that tunnel and to really feel those emotions so that they can get through it, and then see what role they played. And like Michelle said, to be able to own their part of that mistake and move forward and learn. So just allowing it to happen, to remember that they're doing the best they can in that moment. They just need us to listen. Patty Whipfler of Hand in Hand Parenting calls it stay listening. When we're there, we just allow it. Of course, we would set limits against hitting and stuff, but until they're calm and until we're calm, there's no learning that can happen.
Exactly.
And so validating is really helpful.
And I know someone else had a question about what if they take forever to come down, and I want to address that. But before I do, one other amazing parenting expert, L.R. Nosk, many of you may have heard of her. Yes. She has this amazing quote. And I say this every single time I speak or talk to parents. This quote is basically, when our kids have big emotions, it is our job to share our calm, not jump in their chaos. So when we
Yes.
share our calm, it actually helps them regulate because they have what's called mirror neurons. They actually sense our calm and it can help them calm down.
Hmm.
But I love that quote. So I just had to
It
bring it
is.
in. I think I always do.
Yes.
There's a, yeah,
And she's with Little Hearts Books if
yeah.
y'all are interested in learning more.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
So I know there's a question in the comments. What if they take forever to come down?
Mhm.
I have a 3.5-year-old that has a very hard time coming out of that bad
Yes.
place. She gets more and more upset, almost explosive.
Mhm.
So I actually have a couple of recommendations and then would love to hear Amy's as well. But
Okay.
one of them is I actually think we need to teach kids how to deal with these emotions. These are something, because I use the term yuck. I actually teach parents to teach kids what I call yuck release strategies, which are basically soothing skills or coping mechanisms. So we can actually teach them how to take all this energy and channel it in a way that, works for them. So obviously we can teach them the breathing that Amy mentioned before. There are other strategies as well. Some physical kids, who are just move around a lot. They like to do things like wall push-ups or pacing, or some kids like to I know my daughters are 6 and 8, but especially when they were younger, we have this big, huge stuffed animal, and they would just want to squeeze it really hard. So we can actually teach them how to help regulate some of this yuck that they have inside. And when we teach them, they actually become less frustrated, and it can happen a little bit more. I wouldn't say quickly, but more effectively. They can get out these feelings.
Yes.
And the other just really quick thing I want to say is we can also sort of think about what's causing yuck in our kids' lives to begin with, because I think these big feelings last longer when there are a lot of things going on for our kids. So if we're figuring what's going out and doing something I call making proactive deposits, we're thinking about where our kids struggling. And when we are actually making these deposits, they don't get as upset when they get upset. So
Yeah.
those are my two thoughts, but I would love to
Yes.
hear what Amy has to say about it.
Yes. I agree with all of that, that we teach them the skills. Young children can have a hard time. I always say first we have to regulate ourselves. Second,
Amen.
oftentimes if our kids get more upset, it's because we're trying to make them feel better by talking.
That's so true.
And so I would encourage everyone to do this. I am so guilty. You can hear me on here. I talk. My daughter talks. We're talkers. Um, and so when my daughter's upset, I have to go, I'm here. And then I have to be quiet. I do. Whatever words you might use to remind yourself. Um, because what happens is when we talk, we feel like we have to fix it. And I don't like to be fixed. Boy, do I like to fix, but I don't like to be fixed. I'm upset. Don't try to make it better. This is crappy. Listen to my words. And our children are the same. And so it's about just going, you're that hurt. Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, I will say my daughter doesn't even want me to go,
Yeah.
that sets her off. So you'll have to do for your own self. So now instead of going, I just go, I was breathing. Um, so then with a 3.5-year-old, I would say like in 10 minutes, if she's still upset, you might go, I hear some birds outside. Do you want to go with me and count them? See if we can count them? Because what we learned from there's a new book out called The Yes Brain by Dr. Tina Bryson and Dr. Dan Siegel. And they talk about having this experience of upset. And if they're not able to become regulated, to give them that experience of becoming regulated. I'm not a huge advocate for distracting. I do believe that children need to have that experience of being upset and us being with them holding that space. But 10 minutes is a long time for a young child. And so then getting them up and giving them the experience of becoming regulated again at the window or by taking a walk can be really helpful. A lot of times I found though, my kids who are explosive, the more we talk, the more explosive they get.
Absolutely.
Sensory activities. Oh, I don't have anything within reaching distance. You could get out some Play-Doh. You could get out some thinking putty. You could take some, you don't even have to give it to them. That might feel intrusive to them, but you might get it out and break it in half and set one on the table and just knead it yourself. So calm your body down. Your calming down will calm them down. And they might reach for that Play-Doh or that thinking putty and begin to use it and calm down too. think those are two additional things that can help.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, and I think too, you made such an important point. We're not necessarily, the goal is not to distract them out of their feelings at all.
Mhm.
The goal is to actually let them go through the tunnel, to use Amy's metaphor, or to travel the curve, to use mine. We're just like things like using the putty or squeezing a bear are actually ways to let them handle the discomfort and the
Yeah,
energy that they're feeling as they are experiencing those emotions, because if they don't experience them, they just go right back inside their bodies and it all
right.
comes out later. So there's a
It
difference between
does.
distracting and letting them have tools to tolerate what they're
Hmm.
going through.
Right. And to help them.
Mm-hmm.
To help them learn. And you can play with this. Kids love play. So one day y'all might be playing, maybe you have 10 minutes and you can be like, let's play, if they're afraid of thunderstorms, let's play thunderstorm, and you get that opportunity to really play around the upset or the fear. And then having that aha moment, I know what'll make me safe. I'm going to get under the covers, right? And so you practice getting under the covers or whatever skills you want to teach them that they can do to calm down.
Yeah.
We have a swing in our living room. I'm going to get in, it's a hammock that's like a swing. I'm going to get in the hammock and swing, and so you might start swinging to calm down. But all those things that might help, the breath work, like you said, and I love having them name the yuck.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
lovely.
And one of the things I teach parents is, especially when we're dealing with emotional regulation, which is such a big part of parenting,
Yeah,
that there's so much we can do proactively. And when I say proactively, I mean just not when everyone's flooded with emotion.
yeah,
All the work we do proactively to teach them skills and to help them work through whatever they're worried about or get angry about can actually prevent our need to parent so much in the moment. And this is totally selfish because I'm not the best in the moment parent. I am always honest with everybody that I work with. It's just not my forte. So given that I'm not the best in the moment parent, I spend like 90% of my parenting energy doing things when things aren't emotionally, chaotic.
yeah.
And then you don't have as many moments of emotional chaos. And for
Hmm.
me, I find that I feel, more capable. And my kids have tools that, when in the moment they are emotionally regulated, they're more likely to be able to access them because we practice them other times. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing I like to say about emotional regulation: doing a lot of
Yes.
work ahead of time.
Oh, the proactive piece is so important.
Yeah.
Because then they go, oh, this is what mom was talking about. Okay. Instead of like, what the heck's going on? Like, why is mom walking to the window and counting birds?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so so you had said that one of your favorite tools is the tool for yourself. And I love that because we really do have to figure out how to be calm. And then being proactive is about knowing your triggers, right? I know that when my kids hit each other, it's going to set me off. So I got to talk to them about this proactively. Um, the other tools is remembering that behavior is always communication, and behavior that looks like aggression or defiance or whatever else is really just an expression of their what's going on in their brain, that they're dysregulated, they're upset, they're scared, that they're having emotions, and this is all they can do. And so that's why that calm, connect, and then considering what their needs are is so important, like understanding the yuck factor. Um, Potential obstacles. What are some more obstacles that we're going to face besides our own stuff, right?
Great,
Gosh,
great.
that's a big one.
Yeah. I wonder if anyone else, if anyone who's on, feel free. Oh, we have another question, but
Yes.
feel free when we talk about obstacles, and I think we'll return to it in a moment. If you have any obstacles, if you're on here live, that you're facing, what makes it difficult for you, because maybe we can all come up with some suggestions. So,
Yes, please.
but I know we have a question too.
Let's see. Do you have any recommendations for books or other sources with tips on how to help an 8-year-old girl with ADHD emotional regulation? The ADHD component makes it really challenging. Um,
I'm trying to think of if I know books.
so I think Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson's
Yeah.
books, both The Whole Brain Child and The Yes Brain, are both really great. I would ask too if she's had a occupational therapy full evaluation, because a lot of times the things that feed into those behavioral signs of ADHD, especially when it comes to emotional regulation, have more to do with the body. I don't know if you watched the webinar with Greg Santucci, which was on last night, Thursday, April 20th. He talked, I'm going to look for my notes. He talked a lot about what's going on in our body and how it shows up in behaviors. And so he talked about the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system and some other system that has to do with occupational therapy.
Yeah.
And how those things really can affect their behavior. And he talks about some really great tools that can help. So I'll just share what I know because I can't remember, or what I remember because I can't find it. Yes, and so Aaron also says that with autism as well as ADHD is movement.
Absolutely.
So some of the things that help a lot of times is, you know, those big exercise balls? Mine's not around here. You can have them lay down and you can rub the ball over their chest and their arms, their legs, find out what they like and what they don't like. You can have them roll over and press it, and that deep pressure with that ball on them can really help. Greg had suggested getting some Lycra and wrapping them around it really tightly, and that pressure. If you don't have that, my daughter loves to just be squeezed, and she'll say, "Squeeze me, mama," and I'll squeeze her. "Pick me up and squeeze me." She's so big now. Pick her up and squeeze her. All of those things help get them back into their body so that they're not sort of extended beyond their body and their brains into this area of dysregulation. So anything that gets them back into their body. Weighted blankets are really helpful, but movement, jumping, running, cartwheels, they can, that feels really good to them too sometimes.
And I just want to mention the importance of this as well. And I know we're getting some really good suggestions here.
Yes.
With our hands, body socks, weighted vests. I just have heard a lot of parents on this same note. They'll say, "You know what, Rachel, you talk a lot about when my kids are emotionally flooded, they may push or hit. But sometimes one of my children will push or hit and they're not emotionally flooded. It's out of the blue." And often that out of the blue is not an emotional yuck, but what I call biological yuck, which is that, speaking of occupational therapists, they're what we call sensory seeking behaviors. So a child is actually and I'm not an occupational therapist either, but I have a tiny bit of education in this area. Their bodies are actually seeking the pressure or the feelings. And this is one of those systems that you mentioned. Yeah. They'll push someone else because they're seeking that. Whereas if we ask a child to push something heavy, they don't need to push their brother or their sister. So that's still a form of yuck. It's just they're not emotionally overwhelmed. They're actually physically overwhelmed. They need to get that energy out.
Yes.
So sometimes negative behavior is a sign of that as well.
And that could be a teaching moment too, that you do proactively, where you have a milk jug that you've emptied and filled with sand and say, "I know the next time I feel like I'm going to hit, I'm going to go grab that milk jug and carry it around the house, until that feeling passes." Because it is like this physical urge to hit or push, and they need some place to channel that. Do have some great examples. So
they're so great,
movement, cartwheels, jump on the trampoline, swimming, of course. Yes. Proprioception. Thank you, Beth. That was the other one, I think. Compression with our hands. I teach my clients to do this to themselves, and other clients to help their children do it and to do it to their children. Body socks, weighted vests, rolling on the floor is really good. Swinging. Yes, Aaron, joint compressions. All these really lovely ways. If you click over after this webinar and go watch Greg's, he talks a lot about some of these things too. Yes, weighted blankets. So all of these things are some ways we can get our children's big emotions calm. And with ADHD, there's so much sensory input. Children with ADHD are highly attuned to the things around them, and it's a gift, but it also interferes with some things. They're attuned to the sounds, the smells, the lights, and so their body is paying attention to all these things at the same time. So you might find that they need some noise cancellation earphones, chewing gum. Can you advocate for your child to chew gum? I have a whole story around this, but I'm not going to tell it because I don't think we have time. But which you probably know a little bit about it, Rachel. So chewing gum can help. There's lots of brain research on how it can help regulate attention and the brain. It's soothing. My daughter will tell you it's fun. Fun is also important, right? So
and engagement is important too.
yes.
Fun and engagement. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
This is also, by the way, a trick. I was in graduate school, an ADHD and academic coach, so I would help kids with ADHD sort of get through school. And I used to help them all the time. You know, they would have to study for a vocabulary test. And it's really monotonous, and it's very hard, even for a neurotypical child, by the way. Monotony is the enemy. So teaching them how to engage by chewing gum while they're studying for a test, or even I would have them maybe pace while they were trying to do, because I know a lot of you have older kids. This is why specifically I'm mentioning this. Pace while they're trying to memorize these words and sort of set the words to the pace that they're going. All of these ways to engage their brains and engage their bodies actually help them focus on what they're doing, because otherwise their brains start to get distracted by things that are more interesting or engaging. Yeah. So these are all strategies to help kids regulate and focus and do what we as adults want them to do.
Right. Literally, movement helps regulate the brain and body. And we see this over and over in all these studies that are coming up right now about recess at school and recess in detention centers and free play and simplifying our lives as much as we can. Go ahead and read that. That's a good one.
I was just going to say, great suggestions, Erin. While memorizing spelling, utilizing flour on a pan and writing in them, or shaving cream, using all senses will help. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, our instinct, because I think this is the way we were parented, is to say, sit down and study. Don't move. Don't walk around. And we've learned through research that's the opposite of actually how kids learn. A lot of kids learn. So I just want to also mention one resource. I'm not sure if many of you are aware. Go Noodle. Amy, you must know Go Noodle.
Yes.
It's an amazing resource that actually my daughter's school, when she was in first grade, they used to have brain breaks. And they would go to Go Noodle, which is an app, and at gonoodle.com. And this is actually a well-researched site that helps kids move in a way that actually sometimes they actually cross the midline of their body, which helps also with focus and attention. And that teacher, when she did brain breaks, got so much more focus and attention from the kids. And Go Noodle is a great resource to be able to do that. You can use that at home as well.
I think CHADD is also another resource, CHADD.
Yeah, for ADD, yeah.
The crossing the midline exercises is amazing. It really just has such an impact on the left, integrating the left and the right brain and the top and the bottom brain. And that's really sort of what we're looking at, and a lot of what's going on in our children with neurodiverse brains is that they need more brain integration.
And that's what Dan Siegel's work is based on too, if you read those books.
Yes.
I know Beth said something that I think was a lot of people might want to hear. If you haven't seen, Shankar has a good book. His intro or first chapter, it has a story that is so compelling about a child whose behavior was so impacted by the sounds and visual impact of the lights in the room, his physical needs, and how a couple simple things changed a teacher's perception of this child from a hopeless child to one she really enjoyed. I really wanted to read that because I think that's so important.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Beth.
So much. Because we just don't realize how much our environment affect us. So you think about going to like Costco or the grocery store, and it's big and it's loud and it's bright and it's cold, and there's movements and smells and colors, and all these things serve to bombard our bodies. And if we're not particularly sensitive, it's no big deal. We're going to the grocery store. But for children and for highly sensitive people, or just sensitive people, it's like a whole experience in itself that you have to prepare for and decompress from. And so we have to recognize that in our children and in ourselves.
Yes.
So
there was a recommendation for a webinar, and absolutely it's okay to share this here. There's a webinar series coming up, including a webinar by the authors of the Yes Brain, which is Dan Siegel, who's a hero probably for all of us.
Yes.
For parents of children with ADHD and learning differences, and the link is there. That's great.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so T. Spencer says her daughter hates going to Costco, or their daughter hates going to Costco. Yeah, my daughter is like, nah, I'm not going with you.
Yeah,
It's too much.
yeah,
Now, if she has like headphones and she's listening to her music and she's in a good space, sure, she'll go. But uh, I don't go to Costco often enough for those two things to align particularly often, and that's okay.
yeah. And I can tell you, I'm actually a sensitive person raising a sensitive daughter. And I can't be in places where there are a lot of people for very long. And I always
Mhm.
leave family gatherings early. And I'm known, everybody makes fun of me. If you invite Rachel, she's leaving early. It's too
Yes,
overwhelming for me. I cannot
same.
handle it. And I'm 42 years old.
Hmm.
So I know what it feels like. And that's why I love working with parents whose kids do have these sensitivities, because it's very hard to understand it if you don't experience it. No one
Yeah,
else needs to leave these parties, only me. But
yeah,
it's so overwhelming for me. Amy, so there you
yeah,
go. Yeah. It's overwhelming. So maybe
yeah.
some of you parents may understand what your kids are going through, but it is real. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's a real thing. I'm a sensitive person, also raising a sensitive person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes we take a break if there's no place for us to go. We just go find a quiet place, or we go for a walk, or we
Exactly.
sit together and quietly whisper to each other on the couch. We're not being rude. We're just
Hmm.
getting recentered.
Exactly. And that's even better than leaving, because that's not necessarily what I want to teach my kids, but it's about taking a break,
Yeah.
re-regulating, and
We,
then being able to
yeah.
return. Yeah.
Oh, we leave too sometimes because sometimes
Yeah.
I've met my limit, especially at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I'm worn out.
Exactly. Great stuff.
Yeah, so great. If y'all want to add any more questions, we have almost about 8 more minutes. While we're waiting, Rachel, I would love for you to tell them about this new endeavor you have going on.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I have actually something that I started. It's called a Parenting Academy, and it's online. And the reason I started is because I've worked with parents for about 8 or 9 years now, and I was working in the traditional sort of individual consultations. And what happened was parents were saying to me they would work with me for a few months, and things were great for like 8 months, a year, and then they'd come back to me and they'd say, I sort of forgot because you weren't in, we weren't meeting, and so things went back to the old ways. And so I said, I have to find a really financially feasible way to provide parents with ongoing support.
Mhm.
Because I know even for me, like when I'm trying to lose weight, I need it to be around me all the time, or I forget and I fall back into old habits. So I created this online community, and it's called Rachel Bailey's Parenting Academy, for really to provide ongoing support. So each month I have a theme, and I do a webinar like this, which is actually really interactive. I have people, everybody's on the screen and everyone's talking through this webinar.
Nice.
And then I have live Q&As, and I have guest experts who come in. So I had a feeding specialist and a sleep specialist. And it's really just meant for it to be a community of people who want ongoing support in parenting in the way that we're describing, so that we can be reminded and we don't always fall into old patterns. And the last thing I do that I love, this is my favorite part, is that I do what I call, right now it's once a month, but I think I'm gonna increase it to twice a month. It's called a mandatory yuck dump, which is, I use this word yuck. We all get together and we just talk about how frustrating parenting can be. No solutions, no fixing. We just all dump it, and everyone feels so much better. It's sort of based on Patty Whitfler's,
Yes.
parenting.
Listening
With,
partnerships.
yes, listening
Yes.
partnerships. Exactly. I was inspired by that,
Yeah.
and it is so helpful to just be able to say, "This is so hard," and everyone going, "Yeah, it's so hard," and
Yeah.
then we don't fix it. We just listen.
You
So
just dump it.
exactly. We just dump our yuck.
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested, it's on my website. It's rachel-bailey.com is my website. And then there's a link you can click. It says join the academy. So you can learn more about that.
There, I put your link
Oh,
up
thank you. Yeah.
in the chat. I'm going to add that to the YouTube video when we upload this too, so people watching it can find out more
Oh,
information
thank you.
there.
Yeah.
So I don't see any more questions. Rachel, what else do you want to ask or add? We talked about what are emotionally intelligent boundaries, why they're important, some examples like hitting, tools to create and enforce emotionally intelligent boundaries, including for ourselves,
Yeah,
right? Potential
absolutely.
obstacles and how to overcome them.
Yeah. Oh, Erin just made a nice topic, a nice comment. I know we're almost over, but I really love this topic. Thank you both. And thank you, Erin. You gave a lot of input there and some
You
great
did.
tools. So thank
Yes, thank
you.
you.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think the last thing that I would just say is that I think emotionally intelligent boundaries really are about, understanding that boundaries are important for kids. We have to set limits, set boundaries. It actually makes them feel safer. I always use the example of, you get a puppy and you bring this cute puppy home and you have a crate because they told you to get a crate. But you're like, oh, I don't want to put the puppy in the crate because let them have free reign of the house. But
Yeah.
then what does the puppy do? They go into the crate because those boundaries actually create this bubble of safety. And so we really have to set these limits and these boundaries because it helps kids feel safer. We just have to teach them how to deal with the frustration that inevitably comes. And we have to model what respectful handling of emotions looks like. And ultimately we want them to be able to handle things. We need to show them what it looks like and teach them the tools to be successful within those limits. That's really how I see it.
Yes,
So
I
Amy.
agree. That was such a lovely wrap up. Should we just leave it at that?
Oh.
I always think boundaries can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So sometimes I might set a boundary and get so much pushback that it makes me think about my boundary. Like, am I just saying no because I'm tired? And if so, that's okay, but I need to tell her, I'm just really too tired for us all to jump on the couch right now. You might have some flexible boundaries. Sometimes we jump on the couch, sometimes we don't. And it just depends on how everybody's feeling, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you just say, I don't want y'all wearing shoes in the house. We're just not going to do it. Right. And that's okay. It's okay to consider, and it's important that we consider our own needs when we set boundaries.
Yeah.
And to know that I love Kim John Payne of Simplicity Parenting. He was on yesterday as well, and he talked about when they're little, you give them a little bit of space and you say, do you want the red cup or the blue cup? Do you want this cereal or this cereal? And so I wish I could remember the word, but it's kind of like this. And then they get into their sort of middle childhood years and you say, you give them a little bit more, like, tell me what you're thinking. Okay, so I've taken you into consideration. Now this is what we're going to do, right? And then they become teenagers and you go, okay, here's the problem. Let's figure this out together. And some of this you can do at earlier ages, but they do need to know that you are wrapped around them, right? And that you're going to be there. For my daughter, there are times when she can collaborate with me, and there's times when I need to say, we're having a really hard time right now. You can have oatmeal or yogurt for breakfast. And other times I can say, what do you want for breakfast? But depending on what's going on, we might have to bring our boundaries in a little closer, and that's okay. That's being emotionally intelligent about our own needs, about our children's varying needs as they grow and develop.
Absolutely.
This was lovely, as always, Rachel. Thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure to be here. And thank you to everyone who showed up and provided great input and asked great questions. So,
So great. I loved the input and the questions.
yeah, me too.
And I always love hearing from you. And your perspective is just so great. So thank you.
Absolutely.